Often the most basic questions are the most important ones, and that's certainly true in theology. Today we're going to look at one of those, a fundamental idea that we often think we understand, but maybe we don't. And that idea is faith. Christians talk all the time about faith. We put our faith in Jesus. We hold the Christian faith to be true. We are people of faith. We are justified by faith. But what do we actually mean by that? This isn't just academic. Our entire vision of the Christian life is wrapped up in this question. To explore it, we'll turn to two great theologians who didn't exactly agree. The 13th century Dominican priest St. Thomas Aquinas and the 19th century existentialist Soren Kierkegaard. At the heart of their disagreement is whether faith is primarily intellectual or existential. For Aquinas, faith is a supernatural gift and theological virtue that allows us to believe what is unseen. He writes, faith implies assent of the intellect to that which is believed. Faith is thus primarily an act of the intellect, but the will, moved by grace, enables the intellect to assent. Now, Kierkegaard disagrees. For him, faith belongs to the passions, not the intellect. Faith is a decision, a leap of trust, a choice to throw yourself wholly on God. As he puts it, the conclusion of belief is no conclusion, but a resolution. Faith, in other words, is clinging to the teacher himself, not merely to teachings about the teacher. Another key question is whether faith is objective or subjective. By objective, I mean that truth is grounded in the object itself, not in our perception of it. And by subjective, I mean that what matters is how the individual relates to that truth. For Aquinas, faith is objective. Its content is stable and true for all people because its object is God, the eternal and unchanging source of truth. Our intellect may grasp that truth through propositions, but faith doesn't rest on our experience. It rests on God himself. Kierkegaard takes a different approach. For him, the decisive thing about faith is its subjectivity, not because truth itself shifts, but because faith must be personally and passionately appropriated. You can know all the right propositions about God and still lack faith. What matters is entrusting yourself to God in the face of uncertainty. As he puts it, knowing all the historical facts with the trustworthiness of an eyewitness by no means makes the eyewitness a follower. This leads to a new question. Is faith certain? For Aquinas, the answer is yes. Faith is certain not because it can be proved by reason or verified by evidence, but because its ground is God himself. Since God is truth, the assent of faith, though beyond reason, is firm and unshakable. Kierkegaard takes the opposite stance. For him, faith is defined precisely by uncertainty. If you could prove it, there would be no risk, and without risk, there is no faith. Faith lives in the tension between objective uncertainty and the subject's passionate commitment. That is why he calls it a leap, a movement where you entrust yourself wholly to God without any type of safety net in the form of rational certainty. But is faith reasonable? For Aquinas, the answer is yes. Faith and reason, though distinct, are never opposed. Faith goes beyond what reason can prove, but is not contrary to reason. In fact, Aquinas insists that reason prepares the way for faith and that belief is always grounded in God's truth. This conviction was later affirmed at Vatican I. Faith and reason, properly understood, work together in harmony. Kierkegaard, once again, sees things differently. Faith is not unreasonable, but it is a-logical. That is, it's a leap beyond the categories of reason. Reason can take you to the threshold, but it cannot carry you into faith. It can never cross that border. That final movement is not an argument, but a risk where logic gives way to trust in God. So all of this raises the practical question. What does faith look like in daily life? For Aquinas, faith is tied closely to orthodoxy, right belief. If faith is an act of the intellect assenting to God's truth, then teaching, study, and clear doctrine matter deeply. That's why he gave his life to it. That doesn't mean action is unimportant, but action flows from first knowing rightly who God is. Building on this view of faith, apologetics becomes very important for Aquinas. Arguments and evidence can't create faith, but they can prepare the way. They clear the obstacles and show the reasonableness of belief. And because faith is grounded in God's truth and entrusted to the church, that also means that faith can be handed on, taught, and received within the Christian community. Kierkegaard places the weight on orthopraxy, right living. If faith is the passionate leap of entrusting yourself to God, then it shows itself most clearly in risk, obedience, and lived trust. Doctrine is never irrelevant, but it is secondary to the inward decision to follow Christ. That's also why he's so skeptical of apologetics. You can't argue anyone into faith because faith begins where arguments end. And since faith is an existential encounter, it cannot be borrowed or received secondhand. Each person must face God directly without sheltering in the crowd. Now, we should be careful not to over-exaggerate the differences. Neither is saying that we should have orthodoxy at the expense of orthopraxy or vice versa. They do, however, see faith differently. And by placing the emphasis in varying spots, they come out with a view of the Christian life that is not the same. At the very least, though, both perspectives remind us that faith involves the whole person. What we believe shapes how we live, how we defend the faith, and how we pass it on. The tension between Aquinas and Kierkegaard is a reminder then that faith is both communal and personal, both about truth and about trust, both knowing God and entrusting our lives to Him. In many ways, the two can be harmonized, and yet I suspect most of you will find yourselves gravitating toward one or the other. Perhaps in different phases of your life, you'll need Aquinas' reminder of the importance of doctrine, and in other parts, you'll need Kierkegaard's emphasis on radical trust. Personally, at this moment in time, I find myself drawn toward Kierkegaard, but let me know in the comments which resonates with you more. Also, if you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. Now that this has become my full-time job, your support means more than ever. By signing up for as little as $7 a month, you help ensure that this channel keeps going. And you get access to a lot of fun perks, like ad-free videos. You'll get my unfiltered post-show interview reflections, and best of all, in my opinion, you can join my book club where we read the Church Fathers together.